Today marks a special occasion. We're diving headfirst into the world of laser engraving and cutting. This is my first time trying out a laser engraver, so join me as I unbox and try out the Creality Falcon 2 22 watts laser engraver and cutter. I will explore a few different settings and engrave and cut a few things along the way. Before starting, I want to thank the folks from Creality for sending me this engraver. Now some of you may be thinking, why do I need a laser engraver for? Well, you see, you can use a device like this for many different applications, from simple customized gifts, or as a hobby, or to use it for business purposes. Think something like selling custom wedding gifts, for example. With this engraver, you can engrave and also cut a variety of materials as well, so you are not limited by just using something like wood. Alright, so first things first is to unbox the engraver. I'm not really going to spend too much time on this, since there's plenty of other YouTube channels which show the unboxing. Now the one thing to note here is that the Falcon 2 comes already pre-assembled, and all you have to do is connect some of the cables. This is pretty easy to do, and they even include a video on how to put it all together. I got the basic combo version, which also includes this honeycomb workbench, which as I understand it's important to have when using a laser engraver like this one. It also came with an enclosure which helps to keep the smells out, as it includes a fan that you can place on a window to take out any fumes out of the room. I also got a few pieces of wood and transparent acrylic as well. Alright, so before I start engraving anything, I think it's important to mention some of the safety features that the Falcon 2 has. For example, it has a feature that lets you know if it detects fire. It also lets you know when the air assist is working and also if the lenses are clean or not. Aside from that, there's also a big emergency stop button that you can use if for whatever reason you need to stop the machine. Another safety feature is a key that comes with it, which you can set up so that the machine never turns on without this key. It also comes with this set of goggles which you need so you don't stare at the laser without protection. Another thing to be mindful of when using not just the Falcon 2 but any other laser cutter is that you need to have a well ventilated room or use it outside so you don't get any weird smells like burnt wood inside your house. Okay, with all that in mind, it was time for me to start using the machine. As I mentioned earlier, this is my first time using an engraver. In order to use it, you need to install a program that is compatible with the machine. Here they give you two options for programs, and I decided to go with Lightburn. Now you only get a 30-day trial for it, so once you run out you'll have to buy it, or instead you can use the free program which you can also use with this machine. There is a bit of a learning curve for this program, but if you have experience using other programs like Photoshop or any 3D program or 3D printing program, you will see that it's very familiar. I did watch this YouTube video here to get me going and learned all the basics and what I needed in order to start using the software correctly. I watched a few video reviews for the Falcon 2 and they all showed the engraving of a bunch of different squares at different settings in order to see how the different settings affected the engraving quality and cuts. I'm not going to bore you with that type of test, mainly because I think ultimately you will need to test different settings yourself in order to see what you get. In my case, I decided for my first engrave to use some text and cut the outline of it. As I understand, the most important settings for using an engraver are to set the speed and power percentage to an appropriate level for the material you're using. Luckily, Creality gives you a chart you can use for reference as to what power and speed to use for engraving and cutting. In this case, I'm using a piece of plywood and I'm going to use the recommended settings for the speed to be at 6000. I want to test what the power setting does, so I'm going to set this for now to 30 and then go to different numbers to see the different results. For the cutting, I'm going to stick to the recommended settings for wood with the power set to 100 and the speed to 700. Okay, let's start the machine and get it working. One thing also about this machine is that it's really fast. This item, which is about 2 inches long, only took 1 minute to be completed. Okay, so here's what the final results with these settings looks like. Honestly, really nice and clean. The cut is nice and sharp. The engraving perhaps has just a little bit more shading here under the letters that could maybe look a little bit better. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the results. Okay, so next I'm going to try and change the power to something like 80%. The higher the power you go, the deeper the engrave is going to be. So here's how that turned out. The engrave is a lot deeper than the previous settings, but it came out with a lot of unwanted shading around the text, which doesn't look too good. I think you could probably sand it to get a better look, but in this case I'm going to skip that and go to a different setting. Next, I will try a lower power percentage at 20%, but this time I'm also going to turn on the air assist. As I understand it, air assist helps with getting a cleaner result, which is why the manual recommends keeping it on when you are cutting. Though it does recommend you turn it off for engraving, but I do want to try it nonetheless. Okay, so here's what it looks like. It's definitely a lot more shallow and not as dark, but at the same time it looks very clean. Okay, so for the final test, what I want to do is to go back to the original settings that I used for my first engrave, but this time turn on air assist to see if there's much of a difference. Okay, so this one definitely looks a lot better and it has almost the same depth as the original. Based on this, I would probably recommend having the air assist on, though I should probably do a few more tests before coming to such a strong conclusion. Okay, so before engraving something larger, I also decided to try out this 3-inch Nintendo logo engrave and cut, using the same settings from the previous tests, which I found worked the best. In this case that was 6000 speed and 30 power. This is how that came out. This should give you an idea of how precise this machine is while working with small items such as this one. I was really impressed at how precisely the frame for this was cut, given how thin it actually is. Alright, finally I wanted to engrave and cut something a little bit bigger and with more detail. I could have set this up myself in something like Photoshop, but to save some time I decided to head over to Etsy and find some cool ready-made designs I could use. I found this cool design for Pokemon Blue on the Game Boy. I imported the files into Lightburn and also decided to do the engraving for each section separately. Lightburn makes it really easy to set up layers for each section. If you watched that video I mentioned earlier, it should cover all of this and more. For this engrave I was using a different type of wood, one that was a little bit thicker, so I had to try different settings to get a clean cut and the engraved quality I wanted. In this case that turned out to be 700 speed and power set to 100 for cutting, and for engraving 6000 speed and 30 power. I know it might seem a little bit confusing as to what settings to use, but I found that using the chart Creality provides is a good starting point and you can test from there. The nice thing is that once you have some good settings you like for any specific material, all you have to do is write that down so you can use them in future projects. It can be a little bit of a trial and error depending on the material you use. For example, I tried similar settings for cutting acrylic and ended up not getting very clean cuts and the engraving not looking so great either. This is a material I will need to test on more to get better results. Alrighty, so I'm pretty happy with the results that I got from this, and as you can see the image is pretty clear and the cuts are very clean. Keep in mind that I got to this point with only a few hours after setting up my machine, so with more testing I'm sure you can get even better results. So overall, I'm pretty happy to say that the Falcon 2 is not only easy to set up and use, but at the same time it's really fast. That Pokemon engrave took a little less than 1 hour in total to complete. I can absolutely recommend the Falcon 2 to anyone who wants to get into laser engraving and cutting. There's also plenty of business use cases as well for a machine like this one. I have not used any other laser engraver before, so I have nothing to compare it to. But as a beginner, I was able to get going with it pretty quickly. There is a small learning curve with using the software, but after a tutorial or two you should be up and running. The folks from Creality provided me with a link that has a discount applied to it already, and with the holiday season underway, this is probably the best time to get it at a good price. Check out that link in the video description to get it for a cheaper price, and also if you have any questions about it, leave it in the comment section and I will do my best to respond. Okay everyone, thank you for sticking by and I hope to see you in the next one.